Hello there, everybody. This is Andrew Goldstein for the Marquette Wire. We are recording this podcast on a Monday, the day before Marquette takes on Arizona State at the Bradley Center. Well, actually, I should introduce who we are. Like I said, I'm Andrew Goldstein. I was on volleyball for the Marquette Wire this past semester, and I will be going over to women's basketball for the winter season, but today, I'm doing a special basketball preview podcast with one of my good friends, Gavin Shaw. He is a member of the Cronkite sports staff out at Arizona State. He's a sophomore there. And he also writes for valleyofthesuns.com, which is a popular Phoenix Suns website. He's a big basketball guy, one of my old friends. And here he is. Gavin, how's it going?
It's going really well, Slice. We could have talked about this before we went on air, but I wanted to save it for now so I get genuine shock value. I actually got to talk to one of Marquette's, I would say probably your most famous basketball alumni, Dwayne Wade, a couple days ago.
Really?
That's pretty interesting.
Really?
Yeah.
Hold on. We need to delay talking about the game for a second. Where'd you meet him? What did you say to him? Details, please.
Here, one of the benefits with the Valley of the Suns, which is a Sports Illustrated affiliate, I'd encourage everyone to check it out. That was my spiel. Now, fortunately, I get access to go to most Phoenix Suns practices. And we actually, with my school's radio station, me and a couple friends get access through that as well. So I was able to go with my friend John a couple days ago to Suns practice. And it was kind of presumed that we wouldn't really ever get to talk to a legitimate star NBA player. Like, I just assumed I'd maybe get to talk to a couple bench guys, a couple starters. And apparently the year before, when LeBron James was there, all three of the stars were kind of separated from the media. No one was really allowed to talk to them. They were only had immediately before the game and after game access. But fortunately, the Heat had a shoot around the morning before their game against the Suns. I was able to get in there, and they kind of just went around the media. I got to talk to Spoelstra quickly, and then the main focus, talking to Wade was really, really cool. I kind of got luck. I kind of made my own luck by being a little bit pushy, because essentially every player has their own PR guy with them, and he told everyone to kind of leave, and then I stayed and asked him 3 questions right after. And kind of my main focus was the Suns kind of have a slightly similar situation to the Heat this year in their or to what the Heat had the last couple of years, in that they have 3 star guards. The Heat had 2 forwards and a guard who all kind of need the ball to succeed. And Wade kind of reflected on that and kind of described the challenges he went through with LeBron and Chris Bosh kind of sharing the ball. But he gave me some really solid advice, I guess, if I ever get a chance to pass it on to the Phoenix Suns, that it just kind of all comes down to sacrifice ultimately. I actually asked him quickly how long he intends on playing, and I was really hoping for like a direct age or like newsworthy answer or like a shock value, like, oh yeah, I'm going to retire after this season. But what I ended up getting was he just kind of also reflected on how stars like Kobe Bryant, Dwayne Wade, Tim Duncan are playing longer than ever, and you just kind of have to do it until you stop loving it.
Yeah, well, I think he's a little bit too seasoned for you to trap him with that question, but it was a good attempt anyways, and that's really cool that he got to talk to him. Actually, I'm going to say about a week or a week and a half before I left Marquette, I came home Friday night, he was in Milwaukee, and he was actually doing a press conference at Marquette. He runs a charity for literacy among Milwaukee's youth, and he made a very generous donation to it. And unfortunately, I was not able to go because I was studying for finals, and finals ruins everything forever. But actually, before each Marquette game, there's a video that plays of, like Marquette through the years, and it goes, it reviews all the stars that came out of Marquette's program. When Dwayne Wade comes up, the place just explodes. Like, the roof just comes off. Dwayne Wade, Marquette royalty. And, speaking of Marquette basketball, they have a fairly important game coming up against your Arizona State Sun Devils. So let's get into it, shall we?
Yeah, I guess that's the main reason I came on today.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to talk about what an exciting game it was last year. I was fortunate enough to be able to go. It was at Wells Fargo Arena in Tempe, Arizona. And the game actually ended on a last-second block. I forgot who took the shot, but Arizona State had a pretty significant lead in the first half, and one of the Marquette players, Marquette made a huge run at the end of the game to take a 1-point lead. ASU got a basket with about 20 seconds left to push back ahead, and then a Marquette player drives down the lane. Jordan Baczynski, the Pac-12's all-time leader in blocks, just rejects it at the buzzer. Crowd goes wild. I'd say outside of Arizona State's upset over the University of Arizona last year in double overtime, that was the best basketball game I've been to as a college student.
Really? Well, that's it's actually kind of good that you mentioned that, because Arizona State lost 3 of their best players, didn't they? Baczynski, yep. Jaheed Carson, and who was the third one?
And Jermaine Marshall, the Penn State transfer from last year, who was really, I'd say, probably their most Jaheed Carson had his moments, but Jermaine Marshall was probably Arizona State's most consistent scorer last year. And frankly, it really lowered expectations for this team going through the year.
Yeah, because this was a tournament team last year. I mean, they lost on a heartbreaking buzzer beater to Texas, I believe.
Yeah, Cameron Ridley, offensive rebound layup game.
Yeah, and so Arizona State, still they do come in at 6-3. How do they look this year?
Well, I don't know. There are really mixed opinions on Arizona State's upside. I know I've talked to some writers who kind of think they're going to finish towards the bottom end of the Pac-12. Other people, personally in the preseason, I'll be open about it. It's not looking great right now, but I thought they'd make the tournament. I just saw so much potential talent in the junior college transfers they got, and I guess that should have tipped me off right there. It's always an issue when you're relying. They brought in 3 junior college guys and 3 freshmen, and that was really expected to make up a significant portion of their team, along with returning seniors Shaquille McKissick, Jonathan Gilling, and Bo Barnes. But some of the guys haven't been quite as good as advertised. Willie Atwood, in particular, is a huge disappointment. He was a junior college All-American at offers from really good schools across the country, including Oklahoma and I believe possibly Florida as well. But that being said, this team, despite some disappointments, hasn't been horrible by any means. The 3 games they've lost have all been really, really close, and all of them coming on the road. They lost to a Maryland team that's now ranked by 5. They lost to a really talented Alabama squad by 5. And then just recently, they allowed Texas A&M to come back after having, I believe, something like a 12 or 13-point halftime lead and win by 1. That being said, they are riding a 14-game winning streak at home. That's not super relevant here because this game is going to be in Milwaukee. But there's some interesting upside here. What do you think about Marquette so far?
Well, first of all, before I get to Marquette, I just want to address Arizona State going on the road. Don't forget that obviously Marquette is on break for Christmas vacation. The student section will be a good deal smaller and less rowdy than they were for the Wisconsin game just a week ago. So this isn't necessarily a peak Marquette crowd they're getting. But as for Marquette, their last game was an 11-point loss to the Wisconsin Badgers. And I really think that they played a heck of a game. I mean, they kept it within 6 for a lot of the contest. Essentially what they did was they switched to a 2-3 zone defense because they didn't want to go man-to-man and have Wisconsin outsize each guy by 3 or 4 inches. They went into a zone defense, packed the paint, dared Wisconsin to shoot all the threes they wanted. Wisconsin went 8 of 30 on 3-point shooting. And really, I feel like that's the best they could have done. I mean, there were some rolls and some free throws that didn't go their way, but they surrendered a lot of open 3-point shots, and that was sort of what they had to do. It was either that or go man-to-man and have Frank Kaminsky outside Steve Taylor by 5 inches and post him up, have Sam Decker outside his guy. So I think that Marquette was able to compensate for their lack of height very well. And they're playing better than I would have thought. I'm really impressed so far.
Yeah, you guys obviously have a new coach in, I'm just going to call him Wojo because I'm not even trying to pronounce his last name.
Yeah, but, I've heard Wojciechowski. Wojciechowski is correct, but I've heard Wojciechowski, Wojciechowski.
I'm going with Wojo for Mr. Yeah, Wojo.
Yeah, Coach Wojo. That's a proper Marquette parlance there.
Of course. Yeah, and they longtime Duke assistant. You guys obviously will talk about it a little bit more later. You have an incredible recruiting class coming in next season under him. Obviously, you weren't there last year, but just from what you've heard from upperclassmen and people who've covered the team for a couple of years, what kind of changes has he kind of brought to Marquette? Obviously, you guys have kind of maintained that, despite losing some games this year, you guys have kind of maintained that defensive stinginess, holding Wisconsin under 50. And then you have a pretty nice transfer you got in Matt Carlino from BYU.
Well, Carlino is essentially he's the one variable on Marquette that could really swing a game. I mean, I don't think that Marquette's opponents are going to be scared of a lot of this team's offensive firepower just from a game-to-game basis. But if Carlino can go off, suddenly this becomes a different Marquette team. We saw it against Georgia Tech. He scored 38 points. He's the one guy who can really make opponents scared from deep. But as for your comments about defense, this is something that Coach Wojo has really emphasized. I noticed that Sandy Cohen, who's a new recruit this year, Deontay Burton, they haven't been getting a lot of playing time because although they're very talented offensive players, they don't measure up on defense. Actually, Burton announced that he was transferring from Marquette just a week ago because he wasn't getting minutes, and that goes back to Wojo refusing to play people who aren't good on defense. And to contrast, for instance, Derek Wilson, he's a senior guard we have. He was bricking shots against Wisconsin last weekend, but Wojo left him in because he was playing fantastic D. So I think that Coach Wojo's looking to really embrace the fundamentals on the defensive side of the floor and worry about shooting and offense later. And if you have a young team like Marquette has and is going to have, I think that's the right way to go about it.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with you. I think it's so essential to kind of input that defensive first culture and kind of make that as a prerequisite to play when you coach somewhere like Duke. I mean, Coach Krzyzewski, for everything he's done for the game of basketball and as so many championship teams that he's had, I don't think his defense has ever really been. It's never the first thing you think of when you think of a Duke roster. You think of the offensive power. You think of guys like Jabari Parker, J.J. Redick, Christian Laettner. And it's interesting that Wojo is kind of going away from that model a little bit and is just flat out saying, like, look, I'm going to stick with classic Marquette basketball. And even over the years when these guys have had really good offensive players, like a Jimmy Butler, or last year when they had Devontae Gardner, Todd Mayo, I believe Jake Thomas, they still always seem to play superb defense, and when they've struggled on offense, they've still made tournament runs down the stretch because their defense never goes away from game to game, and that's kind of the key for a school that can't really recruit quite as well. Not to say, it seems like Marquette isn't going to be that school anymore with the class they have coming in, but when you can't recruit that well, you got to be able to play that consistent level of defense every game because you might not always have that offensive firepower, and it seems like that system, at least so far, is working to a degree. But when Carlino's cold, the offense kind of goes away. Am I right in kind of thinking
yes,
that?
And to your point, actually, Juwan Johnson, Juan Anderson, Derek Wilson, and Duane Wilson combined for 1 of 19 on field goals within the 3-point arc. 1 for 19 on 2-point shots last week.
Not good.
And obviously, I get that there's going to be a lot of difficulty in driving into the paint against Wisconsin, where everybody is above 6'6". I mean, I doubt that the numbers will be that abysmal against Arizona State, but the fact remains that Marquette has had a lot of trouble when somebody isn't firing from 3-point range. Like, that's a real issue.
Yeah, I'd say Arizona State at this point is probably slightly better on the defensive end on the floor than the offensive side. You kind of looking at this team in the preseason, at least the reason I thought they were going to be so good is I kind of predicted they'd be one of the elite defensive teams in the country. Last season they weren't bad, but it was kind of all based around Jordan Buczynski being the nation's premier shot blocker instead of having a solid group of perimeter defenders. This year it's the opposite. Eric Jacobson, solid man-to-man defender, isn't really anything of a rim protector. Their primary rotation doesn't really put in anyone over 6'8", 6'9". Connor McDougal's right around there. But where ASU kind of excels is they have all these long athletic guys, and Coach Sendik for years has kind of liked to switch the pick and roll, and in years past it kind of put them in really difficult matchups. Last year Arizona killed them at times when they'd switch a Jonathan Gilling onto a really strong offensive player, and now they have all this versatility with guys like Jerry Blake's in there. Shaquille McKissick remains a great defender. Roosevelt Scott, for all of his offensive ineptitude this year, really has some strong hands and is able to create deflections and turnovers. And now I kind of want to move on to a really significant story with this Arizona State basketball team in that they're getting Savon Goodman back, who was a former top 100 recruit, went to UNLV last year, I believe had some criminal charges for burglary, went to junior college for a season, and then picked Arizona State over schools like Florida, Iowa, and Oklahoma.
That's a big get for you guys. Absolutely.
Yeah. He was, if you go back